It is 7 o'clock, and we have determined we have a quorum. To the left of me is Brother William Dooling and Bonnie Hopke. To the right is Bruce Smiley Califf and Walter Bueller. We will consider approval of the minutes from April 19th, 2017 meeting if we have a flavor for a motion.
I'll move.
Motion by Bonnie Hopkins, second by Bruce. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Well, I abstained. I wasn't there, so.
One abstain. This is on the minutes. Well, I guess we have to have, how are we going to pass minutes without anybody who wasn't here from the past board?
Jackie can.
3-0 pass the minutes. How's that? Good call. We're gathered here, we're not in church, but we're gathered here tonight to conduct a public hearing in an application from Quentin and Jenna Baker on 213 Hibiscus Lane. Legal description goes into CB 5778, Block 5, Lot 7, and PT 6 ARB 6E requesting a variance from the following, and it lists several, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In section 51, a definition of dwelling of a unit for a kitchen in a guest home or guest house. Section 50-3, parentheses 7, prohibiting more than one main building on one lot. Section 50-3, subsection F4, ASBU must be in the backyard. Section 50-66, parentheses A, fences in the front yard may not be higher than 3 feet. Section 50-65, masonry required on the ABSU. Section 50-568, building permit issued within 180 days of the variance. And before we open a public meeting, if one of the bakers want to go through this variance and walk us through, we'll entertain that at this time.
Evening, folks. Just for the record, Quentin Baker, presently at 304 Foxhall and the owner of 213 Hibiscus with Jana. Jana's going to be the audiovisual specialist tonight. We have with us our builders, Trinity Custom Home. Here's Tracy and Bubba Myers. So if you have any particular questions on the construction and the survey, why they're here to help. All right? Any better? All righty. We've got an unusual situation on this property that we'll show you in that we actually have a 27-acre tract right here in our city of Castle Hills on which we would like to build a new house, and it really doesn't fit within our city ordinances in many circumstances. Go ahead, Jana. And thus brings us to you for variances tonight. Here's a satellite image showing the outline of the property. On the left or west side, we have the railroad tracks that run along one border of our city. So what you see on the left side is, in fact, the north-south running railroad tracks. To the north of the property is the CPS easement, and just north of that, the McGimpsey Park area. Okay? So we're tucked up between the railroad tracks there in McGimpsey Park. And then the rest of the boundary is a bit irregular. As you can see, the southern end almost goes to Antonian. The only thing separating us from Antonian are the 5 properties that are in Foxhall Cove. All 5 of the properties in the back of the cove have fingers of land that extend all the way back to the railroad tracks also. So quite a long piece of land. Jana, go ahead. Here's the survey, kind of an overall view. This is rotated 90 degrees to make it fit on the slide. So north is now to the left. In overall size, along the McGimpsey Park side, is about 968 feet long. And if we're along the railroad track side, 2,044 feet long by the survey. Along the railroad track side there is the floodplain with the Almas Creek. So the lower part on that slide is all lowland and floodplain area, all right? Next slide, hon, please. Now let's zoom in on the upper left of that survey. This is the area where we'd like to build our house. Hibiscus Lane comes in, you can see it there at the top. Hibiscus Lane comes in and our property is at the end of Hibiscus Lane. If you took Hibiscus to the west and followed to the end, you'd go right into the driveway for the property, right? So the green line there is the surveyed boundary of the property, and you can see where it crosses right at the end of Hibiscus. The two driveways that you see on the drawing are both within the property bounds, both unpaved drives. The one that goes up to the left leads uphill to the existing house, and the one that goes down on the page actually is on a pretty good downward slope and goes into the property and leads to where the old stables were on the property. Okay. Lower left is what had been the horse stables. That's now demolished. They're gone. On the left side are some old outbuildings, also demolished. So the only structures remaining at present on the property are the existing house and a pump house that I'll show you next. Go ahead. All right, so in terms of some facts and figures, just to make this easier for you, as mentioned, the property is located right at the end of Hibiscus, 27.617 acres. In history, it had been a dairy farm in the 40s. It was acquired by the Babbitts sometime in the early 60s or so. They put a horse stable on it and a pecan orchard. So it's always had a bit of a rural use. And it really is a rural property for all intents and purposes. It's not a typical city property. There is no front to the property like you have on a classic city lot. And that's one issue that we'll talk about that is a problem for us with regard to our city codes. Okay? About 60% of the property is actually floodplain, the part down along the Almas Creek. So we have about 2,000 feet or so of the Almas Creek that's through the property, mostly dry, but when it rains, it runs. And we get a lot of water through the property, a lot of City of Castle Hills water through the property, I should say. The existing house, we think, was built in the 50s, as best we can tell. And as I mentioned, the old horse stable, the barns, and the storage building, that slide needs to be updated, and they have been demolished. That is accomplished. Go ahead. The existing house is presently occupied by our son, Sean, his wife, Rita, and our brand-new grandson. So we have family members living on the property. In terms of future use, it will remain either a family residence, a guest house, or a caretaker's cottage. We will commit that we will never turn that into a rental property. We have no desire to have renters, and we would only use that existing house for family purposes. Go ahead. Okay, utilities are another issue. There is no public water source to that property. Water lines have never been run that far down Hibiscus. There's no public gas service either. There's a propane tank behind the existing house for a gas supply. No sewer, like everyone else in the neighborhood, so the existing house is on septic. Electric power does not come up Hibiscus. Rather, our power feed comes in through neighboring properties to the rear on Foxhall Lane. So there's an electric drop that comes in off of Foxhall. But let's talk about the water well. It's a critical asset to the property. It is located behind the existing house. It's actually just past the backyard of the house. It's actually a very good well. It's about 385 feet deep, has a nice new pump that we paid for when the old one went out. It actually has enough capacity to supply 2 to 3 houses. So very good well, very good pump. To ensure the reliability of that water source, we recently added a tank and a pump house that I'll show you on the next slide. And it's just to ensure that we have reliable and uninterrupted water supply on the property. Go ahead. Here's the photograph showing the tank, the well, and the pump house. It's hard to see the well in the shadows, but the water well is in the foreground on that little cement pad. We added the water tank that you see in the back, And the pump house is actually the tough shed building that was put on top of a concrete foundation we had poured. And it's truly a pump house. Its purpose is to house a booster pump to supply water pressure to the house, the pressure tank that you see, the blue tank in the building, and all of the electrical and controls for the wells that are mounted on the wall that you see to the left. So its sole purpose is to protect the water supply and provide the water pumping capacity for the house. Yeah, it's a 3,000 gallon capacity tank. Okay, so to recap on the water supply, that well is the only water supply to the property. The well, tank, pump, and all the electricals and controls will become a shared resource between the existing house and the proposed new house. Okay? There is no allowance in our city codes for such a shared resource, and that's of concern to us. We need to be able to use that water supply, and we don't want to fall into no man's land in our city codes that would prohibit us from using the water supply and the pump building, which we call an accessory building, have that as a shared resource if we divide it into a second lot. So that's one of the main reasons we do not want to subdivide. That is a shared resource. Go ahead. Another reason that we don't want to subdivide is property access. There's a single access point off the end of Hibiscus, and really that's the only credible access point for the location of the new house. On that side, the new house is shown with a star that's about in the middle of the slide. With the slope of the land, which is downhill as you go down on that slide, if we use the lower driveway, that's a steep driveway, and there's a drainage swale that runs parallel to that drive. It's shown as the blue wavy line on there. That's a natural drainage swale, and it's taking runoff from Hibiscus Lane. So the hardtop Hibiscus is downhill coming into the property, and when it rains, well, it runs down that swale. So using the lower driveway as an access to the new house means we have to go downhill on that driveway, and then we'd have to build a bridge across the swale and go back uphill to the house location, which just doesn't make any sense. So we would very much like to use the existing driveway and simply build an extension off that driveway to loop over to the new house. That minimizes the amount of driveway that's needed, and also minimizes the number of trees that have to be cut. So it just makes the most sense to use the existing drive as the access for the new house as well as the old house. Go ahead. Just to give you an aerial view, this is Hibiscus Lane, and the red line is our surveyed boundary. And you can see where Hibiscus ends and the driveway splits. The upper fork goes up to the house, the lower fork goes down to the property and towards the old stable. Go ahead. Okay. Sure. Correct. That's our surveyed boundary line. To the left of the red line are the existing driveways that are within the property. Going down in the center of the slide, kind of going down in the middle.
Off Hibiscus, yes.
That is actually the drive into the Gittinger property. They have a driveway into their house that's right there.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay, we were asked to provide separation distances from other structures, which we did in the packet, but here's the summary. The actual separation, the closest point of the new house to the existing house would be 183 feet. Just to give you a perspective, that's probably greater separation than we have in most of our streets in Castle Hills to the neighbor across the street from you, okay? So we've got real estate, and we've sited the houses well apart from each other, all right? Now we get to the front yard issue, all right? Neither house will be in the front yard of the other house, but the houses are angled not quite 90 degrees to each other, all right? So being that far apart in a rural property begs the question, where's front and where's side? But we've got lots of separation, okay? 183 feet, and I'll show you some pictures, and you'll see you can't even hardly see one house to the other. The houses will also be across the driveway from each other. So that driveway that's shown on the plat, well, the houses will be on opposite sides of it, okay? Go ahead. New house is going to be a single story. We decided that we're getting too old to have stairs. So it's going to be single story, 4 bedroom, 4 bath, 3-car garage, about 4,900 square feet. The setback from the nearest property line is actually to the McGimsey Park side, and that would be 153 feet from that boundary. It's actually the boundary to the CPS easement. That's the closest outside boundary to the proposed location of the house, and that's the nearest edge of the house to the boundary too, all right? We picked a spot that will minimize the trimming of large trees. Actually, we're very fortunate to find a spot that we really can save, I think, all but one of the large trees, and considering how dense the forest is there, it's quite remarkable. We also plan to put a water catchment system using roof runoff for irrigation purposes on the house. Go ahead. All right, a little bit of a busy slide. We'll zoom in on the next one, but this survey shows the location of the new house. This is surveyed in. It's in the upper left, and it's below the location of the old house. Janet, let's go ahead and go to the next slide right away. All right, zooming in on that upper left part, you can see the footprint of the new house. Okay, as I mentioned, the setback on the left side, that's the closest setback, and that's 153 feet from the CPS Energy side. The large trees are drawn in there around the house, and in that siting of the house, we can save all the large trees. There's a lot of small trees that will come out. They're pretty dense, but we get to save the large oaks. And there's actually one elm I really want to save also. Down below where the old stable was shown, well, that's gone. So that's been demolished out. Okay.
Now, I just have a question on that. There's 7 buildings there. You're saying all 7 are gone?
There's only 2 structures remaining, just to make it clear. The existing house and the pump house. Everything else is gone. All of them have been torn down.
No, I remember the stables, but yeah.
There was a barn
But
and
it's
a
just,
storage.
on some of the drawings, they're there and some they're not, and I just wanted to be
Right.
clear that they're not there.
They're gone. If you want to come look, we had them demolished out and hauled off. They were there when we bought the property, and thus they showed on the survey. So the first survey I used, those buildings still show, but they're gone. Let's go back for a moment, Jana. Okay, setbacks. Our city ordinances say that there is a minimum setback of, I think it's 40 feet or 20% of the lot depth, whichever is greater. We've got a lot of lot depth here, okay? It almost begs the question, which way do you measure? So we took the measurement of depth from where the driveway comes in, straight to the left, over to the left-hand boundary there by McGimsey Park. And 20% of that gives us 112 feet. The dashed line you see along our east and northeast boundaries is that 112-foot setback. It's a large setback, and you can see the house siting easily clears that setback. So we're well past whatever 20% setback you might imagine. Okay? All right, let's go ahead. All right, let's take a look at the property. I've got 4 photos showing each compass direction. This is to the north, to the closest boundary from the north edge of the house. That's a 153-foot distance, and if you can pick it out back there, You can just make out the part of the fence that's along the CPS easement. It's pretty hard to find, but you can just barely see a fence line, the top of the fence line back there. Go ahead. We're just going to rotate to the right. So looking to the east, the existing house is back there in the trees. If you can spot it, you have to move around a bit down there, and you can just catch a glimpse of the side of the house. But that's the view to the east. Go ahead. If you look to the south, you can't see anything. There is no structure to the south for probably 1,000 feet or more, some long distance. Go ahead, babe. And then to the west, what you see depicted there are the top of the old stable, which has been demolished. If you go down and look at it now, you'll just see open field. So the stable is gone. All right? We would like to ask your consideration in the siting of the house for an optional location. We would like to clear some of the small trees and brush in order to get a better view of the land before we make our final selection. There's also a pond that had been built on the property decades ago. It's purely a recreational pond. We have demolished that pond down. It was just a mosquito haven, quite frankly. So the mosquito bed is gone, but we wanted to take the pond down, remove some trees before we walked the land and made the final siting of the house on the property. So the next slide, I'll show you the two options. We just asked your latitude to be able to choose one of those two options rather than commit to one today. All right, go ahead. All right, this slide shows the optional location, which is to the right, or on this slide, it's to the south of the location you saw on the prior slides. You can also see where the pond and the pond's berm was located. That's one of the issues, is the berm is pretty darn close to where the optional house location would be. It's actually a flatter piece of land right there, would require less concrete in the foundation if we used that spot. But with the slope and with that berm, we're just not quite sure it will work. So with your indulgence, we'd ask you to allow us to choose one of those two slots for the house. Okay?
Question, the B dimension, if that was the beginning of the property to that option B of the house, to the side of the house, what's that distance?
If we move it over, it'll add a little over 100 feet. Remember overall house length? Maybe like another 120 feet from the property line. And we still stay within the 112-foot setback. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And Mr. Baker, just on the same line, just thinking ahead, you're not asking for any variance to the setback because you're within that 112 feet?
Right now, we don't need to ask you for a variance for the setback.
Because the thinking forward was conceivably, I doubt it, but conceivably at some point hibiscus could be extended along Gittinger's property straight down, but you'd still be within the...
I'm sorry, I'm not following where you'd extend hibiscus.
Just straight down the Gittinger property where it ends?
In the side of hibiscus, because hibiscus dead ends into our property.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying, theoretically, I suppose it could be extended, but you'd still be, even if it were...
Even if it were, we'd still be okay.
So
The Gittinger property does not run down parallel to that. Brother Dooley, it cuts off north of that.
Well, that's what it shows on the map.
No,
It says L. John Gittinger right there.
yes, Gittinger is on the right side of the street as it's shown in that drawing,
Yeah.
or down to the right, so
Right.
across the street from our property.
Yeah.
But it doesn't extend very far. You can see where our property comes down and bounds Gittinger on the lower right. So if they allowed hibiscus to go on their property, it wouldn't go very far before it hit our property again.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to talk about fences. We learned a lesson at our current house on Foxhall Lane, and we'd like to extend that lesson to this house. And the lesson we learned the hard way is that deer love to bed down in Jana's gardens, her planters. We had a number of instances where deer just decided that's where they like to be. And when going in and out the front door, we'd have startled deer jump up, which for her elderly parent and my elderly mother became an issue. So for our existing house on 304 Foxhall Lane, we were allowed a variance to build a fence just in the front yard around the front door. We would like to do the same here. It's shown as a courtyard there on that drawing. It's a small, rather small fenced area just to protect the front entrance into the house. We would like to put up a 6-foot fence there to keep the deer out, and that's what it's for. It's deer protection, quite simply to keep them away from the front entrance of the house. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is what it will look like. You can go by our house at 304 Foxhall Lane, and we're virtually going to duplicate that fence arrangement on the new house. It's wrought iron fence. We try to make it as unobtrusive as possible, so when you're driving by, you hardly notice it. And that's the kind of, virtually the same kind of construction we plan to use. Okay.
Would you back up and show me the proposed, just back up and show me where that fence is going to be next to the...
Right there. So you see off the front of the house, there's an extra line.
In other words, it's not up on the street, it's right at the house.
It's right at the house. It extends at most 28 feet away from the face of the house, Bruce.
Perfect, thank you.
And no fencing around the, like where hibiscus runs into your property, you're not talking about putting any kind of a fence?
We actually would like to place a gate there at some time because we've got a heck of a trespassing property. We have lots of sightseers who just go right down the driveway. Even in spite of the end of the city sign, in spite of us having no trespassing signs up, it's almost a daily exercise for people to come barging into the property. You'll see we put an orange cone out now
Yeah,
as our
well,
latest attempt.
I drove by there before I came down, so that's, I saw the no trespassing signs and, yeah, dogs, the cone as I tried to turn around and
Yeah.
come back. I just wanted to see where the property was, so
Yeah.
I
So
saw all
we-
that, and was sort of one of my questions. So Bruce, you're asking was, you know,
So
where-
eventually, and eventually maybe sooner rather than later, we would like to place an automated gate across that entrance to stop the trespassing problem. It's a chronic problem, and until we get a gate there, we're not going to stop it. So, but that's not on the table today, unless y'all want to be gracious enough to add it.
so the gate, or the 6-foot is essentially just around your courtyard there.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
That's all we're asking for. We actually don't plan to put up any other fences.
okay.
It's going to stay an open rural property.
And Mr. Baker, can I just ask a question on that? Because I know previously people with the deer and the height and all, at 304 Foxhall Lane where you have that current fence, and that's 6 foot?
That's 6 foot.
And do you find that to be adequate for your purpose?
So far, the deer haven't gone over it.
Because there was
We-
another gentleman years ago on Foxhall wanted 10-foot fence because he said, well, 6 isn't enough, and I'm just...
In the backyard, we had one deer come over the 6-foot fence, but never in that front courtyard area. And only once in the backyard, since we put up the fence there, has a deer cleared it. We know that because the deer got hung on the other side of the fence trying to come down, and we had to go rescue it off the fence. So,
He tasted good.
okay, let's see, we covered the fence, right? And again, if y'all want to go by 304 Foxhall, you'll get a perfect example of what it looks like. All right, one additional request is to be able to put in a garage/workshop, and it's virtually for farm equipment. We learned very quickly after we acquired that property that a normal lawnmower just doesn't do it. You need a tractor. So we now own a tractor, a shredder, a forklift attachment, and a box front-end bucket for the thing. And that's really what it takes to maintain the property. That equipment is simply sitting out in the open now in the weather, and grass grows up through the implements when we're not using them. And we just really like to have a place to get them under cover and also to just protect the equipment. We just need a place to take care of the equipment. So I would like to build a garage/workshop at the very rear of the property. Oh, yes, the garage/worship. Sorry for the typo on the second bullet.
I had
Yeah,
a question on that, just
It
for
was-
the record,
It was divine intervention
I
when I was
wanted
typing, Brother Dooling.
to make sure you weren't planning on religious services in your garage.
No plans, no thank you. Approximate size, 40-foot by 50-foot, with about a 20-foot by 20-foot awning, an area, just a roof as a carport for the tractor and its implements, okay? And the construction is typical barn construction, pre-engineered metal building, which we can see on the next slide. And so this is just typical, I mean, it's the typical rural construction building. We're going to pick a color to make it as unobtrusive in the countryside as we possibly can. We don't want it to be seen, we want it to be out of the way. It's just a utility building to help us out. Okay? And its location is shown on this slide. It's tucked up in the northeast corner of the property, back near the back property line, out of sight of virtually everything. It's as far back and out of the way as we can put it. We really don't need to put down any impervious cover for a driveway because it's a tractor after all. So we can just use an earthen driveway to get back to it.
And Quentin, can I ask you a question at this point? Because later on in your summary bullet points, it's summarized as requesting that there be a variance for the ABSUs not being in the front yard. In other words, they're required to be in the backyard. But as I'm looking at this, it occurs to me that both that pump house and the proposed garage workshop are in the backyard of the current house. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
So,
So the issue with the, and we'll get to that, the issue with the front yard is that the existing house could be considered to be in the front yard of the new house. So what becomes front and side,
I see.
okay? Moreover, for the new house, the pump house and the garage could both be in the front yard of the new house. So the front yard, side yard designation comes back to haunt us no matter how we do it. Any questions on the garage worship shop and its location? Okay, going on.
Mr. Baker, distances setback left and right of that new building shed is what, to the property line?
You can see the dashed line on the drawing there that shows the required setback, and we'll make sure we're well within that setback. Okay? Okay, masonry construction, our city codes require that we have at least 75% masonry. Well, obviously, the garage structure, if it's a pre-engineered building, will be an all-metal building and won't pass that test. So just for the garage workshop, we'd like a variance to be able to put in a pre-engineered metal building instead of having to be 75% masonry. There's no point in putting the cost of a masonry building into what amounts to a garage for a tractor.
and I have a question just on that point. The pump house that you showed, I take it that's new,
That's new.
and that would be considered under your new proposal as an ABSU as well.
Yes, we think it has to be treated as an ABSU. We didn't find anything in the ordinances would let us exclude it.
So my question is, did you get a variance for that? Because it didn't appear to be masonry.
No, we did not. And why? Where's Janet?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we talked to the city staff about that. Good point.
That was also a replacement building of a dilapidated shed that was pre-existing. So
There was a
it was a pre-existing building that had been repaired.
There was a dilapidated shed that was not in that same location that we took down, and then we put that pump house up,
Okay.
okay? All right, so let's talk about the specific, well, let's go on to the variances. Let's go to the next slide. So, why are we here in front of you asking for the variances? Well, it's because we've got this unique property that just doesn't quite fit our city codes. I mean, it really is a rural piece of property, and front and side are very hard to define on this property. The water supply is a critical issue for us. We've got to share the well, the tank, the pumps, the pump house, all the electricals between the two houses. And then driveway, we would rather not have to divide the property and put in another driveway that's as longer than the existing driveway. It just makes sense to share the driveway and not have to do any more cutting than is necessary. All right. So keeping the property as a single property, why it minimizes the impervious cover, retains all the trees and the canopy, and really allows then what we need most importantly is sharing of that pump house. Go ahead. So let's talk about the specific various requests. We tried to enumerate them here for you as best we could. There's actually a total of 7 on the listing here to cover all these different issues. First is the main building or dwelling unit. There's the limit of 1 per property. Of course, we're asking to put another house on the lot, so we need a variance from that first code section. Number of accessory buildings on the property. Well, it depends on now how you count the existing house once the new house is built, whether you call it an accessory building or not. But regardless, with the garage and the pump house, that's 2 accessory buildings right there. So we need a variance so we have more than 1 accessory building. All right. The ABSU location. This is where the language for front and side yards comes back to haunt us. And as I said, the pump house and the garage could each be considered to be in the front of the new house. The existing house could be considered to be in the front if you wanted to go that far. So just to make sure we're squeaky clean with our codes, we'd like a variance in terms of the location. So there's no way to get tangled up in that front versus side issue. Go ahead. Fences, we talked about putting the fence around the courtyard in the front, so that variance to allow a 6-foot fence there in that front courtyard is needed. And then in definitions, we have this issue with a variance to allow 2 kitchens on the property, 1 in each of the 2 houses, the existing house and the new construction house. And let's go to the next slide. There's a construction period of 180 days. We think that's going to be tight for this project, especially if we build the garage as well as the existing house. So we'd like some latitude in terms of 180 days, and to get both projects done, we'd actually like you to consider 2 years as the completion of everything that we need to do. We don't think it will take that long, but we'd rather not have to come back to you later and ask for an extension on that. And then lastly is the masonry construction ordinance. We'd like a variance to allow us to build a pre-engineered building for the garage and workshop. Okay? And that's it, folks. Let me go to the last slide. There's a frontal view, an elevation view of the house that's drawn. The drawings are complete. We're virtually ready to ask for a building permit. And that's the front as the house that will appear. Up and Tracy are here. They can answer any questions you might have on the house construction. They build a very nice product. They're out of Fair Oaks. They built a lot up in that area around Bernie and the like. Used to country building on large lots. So we really like their product. I think it'll really fit well in the city.
Could we go back to the second slide, please, that has the entire property on it, please? Is it the first one, whichever one it is? Oh. Well, that's nice.
No, where's that? Almost Creek.
That included in the pond?
No, the second, I'm sorry, Quentin, the next one. There we go. On the plat, that is on the map that we were provided, and if my memory serves me, that has been a non-deeded piece of property, sort of where the stable is. Has that been cleared up now? Is that a...
Everything is deeded within meets and bounds.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
what is the approximate footage from the north boundary line, the Foxhall Lane direction line, down to about where the old existing stable was? below where the
So-
proposed house is.
On this drawing, you're going from the topmost line, Bruce, down to the
To
old
where that
stable?
little rectangular thing where the actual stables were.
Probably on the order of 500 feet to 600 feet.
Okay. Do we know?
We can get it off a survey. We've got the survey, but
Yeah,
I don't have the
I-
exact number for you.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Baker, you have anything else to add? It is 7:40. We're going to open up public meeting. The sheets in the back, if the secretary this gives the opportunity for the public to speak on this issue. Thank you. We have Jackie Ackley. Would you like to come?
Good evening, Board. I'm Jacqueline Ackley from 118 West Castle Lane. I've had the opportunity to, well, walk and golf cart ride the property because it's large. My thoughts go along these lines. Probably 99.9% of the homes in Castle Hills are laid along roads or cul-de-sacs on properties that range from about a third of an acre, I think that's the smallest that a zone residential home can be, to maybe 1 to 2 acres on the large size. Probably average is less than 1 acre. So when homes are on an average of 1 acre plus or minus and arranged on streets and rows or on cul-de-sacs, the homes are facing each other. And the lots are confined in the sense that once you put a home on it and maybe an extra building, that's a lot on the lot. So a line like that, for the average home in Castle Hills, it's straightforward to know what is front, back, side, and there's a need to want to maintain uniformity in appearance and a high grade of appearance because neighbors look across the street at each other and you don't want to see their air conditioning unit or their garbage cans or their, RV parked right in front of their house as you look out. The property under discussion tonight at 213 Hibiscus is an exceptional property. It's just not like any of those others that I just described. It's sort of arranged like the bushy part of an apple tree at the end of the trunk. You can walk down Hibiscus Lane, which I do daily, and it stops. And then you see woods. About all a person can see from the street is about 25 feet of dirt road, and just don't even know that there's a house there. My points are that the house that's existing there, and when I got a chance to ride in the golf cart to the site where the new home might be, those sites aren't even visible from where a public car or a police vehicle would go. And so, and neither are the home sites, in my observation, visible to each other. When you're standing at the old home, could you see the site of the new, or standing at the site of the new, could you see the old? So many of the ordinances that have a purpose of maintaining visual pleasantry and uniformity and high standard for our community really fall by the wayside as they don't apply to this scenario that we're considering tonight. And so I just think so many things like not having a 6-foot fence in the front yard that must be for visibility, or so that when the police come by they can see if a bad guy's hiding on your front porch behind the hedges or something. You can't even see the homes from the public end of Hibiscus Lane where a non-owner or even a policeman could go. So I certainly, in terms of size, 21 acres, that's plenty of room for 2 Zone A residential houses. I mean, it's just a lot of room. And so to me, this is much more like a family farm or ranch. And so often on family farms, you have your child live next to you when they become of age, or you have a barn for the implements, and it doesn't have to be masonry because it's a barn. And in this instance, nobody would see it except for the people who own this property and choose its composition. So I'm just trying to make the point that many of our ordinances, I'm sure, are drawn up for good purpose to apply to the other 99% of the homes in Castle Hills wouldn't seem to be needed here. And I hope that the variances can be agreed upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sackley. Our next sign-up is Sean, and I can't read the last name, I'm sorry, at 400 Fox Hall. Is Sean here?
Sean Timlin, 400 Foxhall Lane. I received a letter because I'm within the boundaries, and I wholeheartedly support the Bakers in whatever they would like to do with this property, as they saved our neighborhood from condos, apartments, because many developers were fighting for this property. And I know that they will be good stewards, and I am for you accepting all the variances that they need to complete their project.
Thank you so much. I don't have anyone else on the list. Is there anyone else in the audience, Boy Scouts included? Welcome, our guest, for public speaking. Yes, approach and state your name and your address.
Thomas Ventress, 211 South Winston Lane. For the reasons that Jacqueline Ackley stated, I think that the usual concerns about property really don't apply here. I think really the biggest standard, in my opinion, needs to be, is it a detriment to the city in any way? And if you can't find a detriment to the city, I don't see why you could take issue with the individual details. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any others? It is 7:46. We're closing the public hearing. Now we'll wait for a motion on this for discussion.
I make a motion that we accept, that we grant a variance for the delineated items on the agenda. Yes, I mean, because I have some, this is just to get it to talk about it.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Bonnie seconds. Okay, now it's open for discussion. And brother, we'll start on the left side with you.
Yeah, I basically agree with what the public speakers mentioned. I think all of those things apply, but one of the standards, notwithstanding what the last gentleman said, is that you're being asked to be relieved of a burden, and the burden has to be greater than that any other citizen would be expected to carry. And to me, the only one on here that's of consequence, and it's kind of a small item, so maybe it's inconsequential, but I don't see where, oh, and the other thing is that the variance is requested because of a uniqueness in the property. And I think all of these things fall under that basic category. The only one I don't see really meeting the standards for the variance is the request for the non-masonry SUB auxiliary building for the garage. I guess if it were called a barn, see, a garage means like you would have with your house, like a setback garage or something like that. It would still have to be masonry. So that's the only one that gives me pause, but all the rest of them I'm 100% in favor of, and I think...
Well,
I
I
can't
think,
hear you.
so I think it's more the size, because the way the code is written, it's any building larger than 120 square foot has to have the 75% masonry. So whether you call it a barn or you call it a garage, it's larger than 120 square feet, and that's what the issue is.
It's basically a freestanding garage like a lot of people have in the back of their property, but those still have to come under that category. But that's the only one that just gives me pause. I kind of like the idea of a red barn on a rural property. So, you know, I'm kind of conflicted, but I think the rules state that it's not unique to the land per se, it's just a garage like anybody else would have. So that just gives me pause, but.
Thank you, Brother Dooley. Bonnie?
A question on, because all of the drawings showed kind of that long, looks like that long soil driveway kind of coming down that went to the old barn. Are you just leaving that to go back to whatever natural condition it's ever going to be? Because it looks like you're now, the driveway to your new home is coming a different direction off of the driveway going to the main house.
Both existing driveways would remain. The lower driveway is needed for access into the heart of the property.
I'm sorry, for access into where?
The heart of the property down where the old
okay,
stable
down
was.
to the bottom, okay.
So if we come from the new house straight down, there's actually a rock ledge, and it's not conducive to put a driveway from the new house coming down into the property because you fall off a rock ledge.
Okay,
So really, we need to keep the existing lower driveway. That's my route for the tractor to get into
To
the
get to the
field
back.
and to maintain the rest of the property. So we will
Okay.
keep it as an earthen driveway. We'll have to maintain it and grade it on occasion like we have, but it will remain an earthen driveway.
okay, and then the other question that I had, I think that one. Just clarification, you said the pond is gone, you filled in the pond, is that, okay, so
Yes.
the pond is just not there, the berm is still
Yeah, what we did
there,
was
but
basically cut the berm and use the berm as fill.
Just-
We need to
okay.
do some grading, some sloping on it now, but at least the mosquito haven is gone.
Okay, and then my third question and my last question is, all the views that you showed north, you know, and even towards where the existing home, how many of those trees, I mean, you'll be pulling down some trees when you put in the new house, but, you know, right now it's showing, based on all the trees that are there, how much more site are you going to be able to see once you start clearing out some of the brush and the lower,
Yeah.
you know, the scrub?
We
and-
need to clear out scrub and young, small growth trees around it just to have some more room around the house and have a view around the house.
Right.
So like on our Foxhall house, we have a backyard there, and past that yard, we just left it natural. So we have a border all around our current backyard that's just natural woods.
So
We'll do that
chances
same
are
thing.
you're still not going to be able to see the old house, you're not going to be able to see whoever's property or the railroad tracks or anything else once you go ahead and take down whatever trees and remove the scrub. And you want to remove a lot of that scrub anyway, as it's fire hazard.
It is,
Especially
and-
as
and
dry as it's starting to get to be. You don't want to be dealing with something coming up and then whoosh, your brand-new house goes.
Right. So we'll have a zone around the house where we get rid of scrub, but past that, we're gonna leave it natural. We don't wanna see the other house, we don't wanna see the boundaries. Down towards the field down lower, we do want a view of that pasture. But all the trees that go along the creek block the view of the railroad tracks down there. And we'll leave that vegetation. There's some beautiful big trees along that creek. We're gonna take out some invasive species down near the creek to protect those big trees over time, but it'll just be that. We had a naturalist come in and look through the property with us. We'll go through that process over time and protect the good stuff.
Thanks,
Thank
Bonnie.
you.
Bruce?
I love terms. I mean, the words we use in the city, because we use the term driveways instead of in reality, what we're calling a driveway tonight that goes down into the heart of the property is actually a very important public safety item for the city of Castle Hills, because that is where our public safety officers gain access to one of the major portions of our western boundary, which is this side of Loop 410, and it's very important that stay. In the old days, we called it the access road for safety. The other one, I like the fact that we're using the term pond tonight, when in actuality it was a manufactured tank. There was nothing there to do a pond. Also, the fact that we're calling a barn a garage. It's not a garage, it's a barn. And it's traditional in this city. If you go back many, many years, we had a number of barns throughout the city when we had larger pieces of property that have since been subdivided, and these barns have been torn down. I wish I had the property to have a barn. Now, I do, I like it. And I mean, I just have to put it in that form. I think it's a very, very pleasant and nice use for my neighborhood, because I am in that neighborhood. I know the quality of the contractor, the quality of the owners, and knowing that in designing and building this home haven, Casa Baker, that it will be lovely. It'll be nice. I like the old heart tug things of extended families being close, and but there are some things I have some concerns about. What I'm concerned about is we're looking at a 27-acre property that, quite frankly, I personally do not want to see subdivided at this point. It would be, and when I say subdivide, even subdivide to meet some of the criteria that we've set. Also, having recently acquired the property, and I do say, what's it been, 2 years now, 3 years, 4, 5 years, God, time flies when we're having fun. However, the vision for the full 27 acres is something that it migrates. It comes with time. It comes with the vision of the owners and the uses and the creativity that can come forth. So where I am concerned is looking at, now variances run not with owners. This is not a special use permit. It runs perpetually with the property. I happen to be the person on Foxhall Lane with the 10-foot fence. That 10-foot fence variance goes with my property, whatever. So if we grant all of these variances in whole with this piece of property, it grants it throughout the whole section, not knowing what that vision is going to be. That does not stop me from supporting it. However, what it will probably ask after Mr. Bueller speaks and the chairman speaks is to offer an amendment to the motion, amending it to say, let's cover from the eastern boundary approximately 550 feet towards the west, which will guide all the way down to where the stables used to sit. This should accomplish all of the things that the Bakers would like to accomplish. It would not require subdividing. It is fully permissible under our rules and the city rules to allow us that flexibility. And then as the next step comes, as the next part of the vision comes on that property, we can be reapproached, or by that time, who knows, our ordinance may have shifted or shuffled or whatever the use is. But that's my thoughts. I think it's a super use. Did I have anything else? Nope. That's it.
Thank you, Bruce. Walter?
I really don't think I have anything more to add. I think everything's been, my concerns or issues have been already addressed, so.
Well, thanks. First, let me address the Bakers. Great job on presentation, explanation, visuals, helps for all the committee, helped go through this smoother. My thoughts, as Bruce, you know, the board here is after a couple things. One is to maintain the unity of Castle Hills and in spirit of keeping us uniform. And the reason we exist is because we're not uniform everywhere. And that's the beauty of the board. So we have several different areas in Castle Hills that different ordinances you have to look at differently. So this is definitely one of them. I don't think there's another property in Castle Hills that's probably over 10, well, maybe 10 acres, but that could be part of this discussion and incorporated in a motion where we exempt ourselves from future problems of people coming and wanting to do the same thing on smaller properties. We kind of address that because this is a unique thing, so I think we're okay, but for this board, something just to think about. But I'm in favor. I think it's laid out well. I think you covered all your bases. We're at a point. Any other discussions here?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, yeah, there were a couple things I forgot to look in my notes. Mr. Baker, when you mentioned, because you used language, and maybe it's just the lawyer in me, I don't know, but you said it will never be a rental property. But, you know, I think you mean to the public. Because certainly I could see where one might have a family member that you would still expect them to pay something, or not, as the case may be. So I just think maybe in whatever written things you do, that maybe it'd be a little bit more clearly defined that not to rent to a public rental property to a non-family member, or something like that.
And that's fine. If you prefer that language, we don't intend to charge family members rent. So either family
Well,
or public, but if.
Now you don't, but you never know.
But
So-
certainly, if you want to
Yeah.
make it delineated to, you know, to public, non-family members, I'm happy with that.
And then I had a question, sort of like Bruce, in that you said 60% of the property is floodplain.
Yes,
So I did a calculation, and that comes out to then 16 acres are developable. Because the
it's the other way
floodplain
around.
part, I would assume the floodplain part lies mostly west of the previous stables.
that's correct. In fact, the
That
stables, the horses sometimes got
Yeah.
water on their feet when it really flooded badly in there.
And that's that whole thing that goes down behind those other houses and over
That's correct.
that way along the railroad tracks. So in terms of, even if it were subdivided in the future, it's not really a 27-acre plot that could be subdivided. It's much smaller than
That's
that.
correct, and that's one of the things to realize is it is a lot of floodplain. Our city needs this property to stay floodplain.
Yeah,
I mean, if y'all don't have any idea how much water goes through there from our city and goes downstream towards Foxhall Cove, Antonian, the church, the ball field, Aggie Park.
yes, and I'm at the other end of that, so I
So-
know exactly how much.
So we need that 2,000 feet of creek to stay natural. One thing I've learned in researching it now is it needs to stay natural to slow the flow of water. It's a collector and it controls the flow of water. One of the reasons we interceded and put in a bid on this property is we learned a developer wanted to go in and put 24 houses on that property, clear cut that creek and put in a concrete drainage ditch. And imagine what the flow would be downstream with a concrete drainage ditch on that property. So that's the time when we stepped up and made an offer on the property. So, yeah. So we need, as a city, to keep it that way. We're going to make moves to preserve it. And protect it.
And my other question is really not germane to tonight's discussion, but since you kind of mentioned it in terms of water, where is the nearest fire plug?
On Hibiscus Lane. in
On
front
the
of David
northern,
Lewis's house.
southern
Yeah, at the bend
property
in-
line.
If, it's a little bit off our plot there, but two houses, the Gittinger property borders us, and the next house is the Lewis's.
Mhm.
The fire plug in front of the Lewis's house.
Lewis's. Mhm. So it's a ways from,
Any other discussions with the board? We have a motion on the table, and I'm going to go back and read the variance. So the motion was made to accept the variance. And I don't see in here where you talked about rental when it said, what they wrote is see all attached. I'm going through the attached. Is there anything in there that
Yes.
says, what page is that?
Yeah, and I guess that was one of the things that I was gonna bring up, you know, the thing is, and that's, I think, my biggest concern about all of this is that, yes, as long as you own the property, you promise not to rent it outside of having it be used by family or maybe help or whatever. But when you go to sell the property, there's nothing that protects, that says that that property, you know, somebody can't live in the big house and rent out the other house. And that's sort of, I don't know how to fix that. Bruce raises his hand, but that was
Well,
and it's not that I don't believe that you all won't, but
And that's more of a, you know, we're voting on this variance not for public or rental property. But since it was brought up in here, somewhere, I don't know where that was.
It's on page 3, section 50-1, definitions
Page-
of the attachment.
Oh, we'll
If
never
it-
use property as rental property.
If it helps you, the way I understand the zoning currently reads, and there's efforts to change portions of the code, but you're not allowed to rent out your house or other parts of your house to people that aren't directly related to you, I think is the way it's written. And you can't have more than 3 people who are not directly related to you living on your property. Part of the reason we had to ask for all these things is that the definition of lot is amorphous, and it works well when you have normal subdivision properties, but lot on this property is basically 27 acres. And our intent is never to have that extra house be rental property. We would prefer that when we're ancient and can't take care of ourselves, maybe we'd have a caretaker live there. If we get permission to build this house, my son and daughter-in-law and baby who live at the 213 currently are going to buy our house at 304 Foxhall. So basically that house will not have anybody in it, and that's how we'd prefer to have it, except to have relatives who visit. My daughter-in-law's father lives in Florida, and they come usually every 3 months to see the baby, and that's kind of our intent, and then maybe long-term have caretakers live there. But we don't want other people living there if we can avoid it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion, please.
Let's hear the amendment.
can I ask one question before we go to that? Jana, I'm sorry, the square footage of the existing house is, do you know?
I want to say about 2,000 square feet. So
Okay.
it's 3 bedrooms, a living room,
That's what I figured it was.
dining room.
Much,
Right.
probably half of what your new house is going
Yeah.
to be. Okay.
We have amendment on the table.
I would like to amend the primary motion that the variance should be granted delineating from the eastern boundary westward 550 feet to the west only on the property, and that dual occupancy by other than first-party consideration of the owner is prohibited.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for purpose of discussion because I don't understand it.
All right, so we're open for discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I don't understand is it's 500 feet westward, and if I'm looking at this, that's kind of down there in the floodplain, so I'm not sure where on the map.
It's at the bottom of the hill.
I understand, but I don't understand the purpose of the 500-foot delineation in the floodplain.
My reason for this is because that's where it stops with the entire rest of the property progression, which means I'm asking that we only grant the variance for the actual proposed home site surrounding buildings that have been proposed and not extending it to the entire 27 acres tonight. Thus,
Perhaps it could be re-expressed, because the delineation part throws me off. I just don't, but the way you said it, that makes sense.
yeah,
Can you pull up slide 1 again, or slide 2?
I think it's two.
And we'll make sure we look at,
And I understand the point of it because of the running with the land. So you want it to run with those two houses and their environs.
And a reasonable amount of property with them.
So if we look at where it says Gimsey Park, and we come down 500, it goes how far down this channel?
It would actually, the intent, see where the old stables are, where that dark line is, this side of where the star is?
Mm-hmm.
That, and Quentin, I'm taking your guesstimate on square foot, on how many feet. I don't have that measurement exactly.
You wanna move up ahead to to the picture that actually showed where those old stables were? 'Cause
It would run it right there. So we would be granting the variance for all of this, which is all of the things that has been presented tonight. But we would leave this portion as is, as thoughts develop and feasible. That way, if, heaven forbid, there was a change, I mean, we've had situations in Castle Hills where we've had phenomenal complexes, and then there's, heaven forbid, a death or a change or something.
Right.
And this way, it doesn't perpetually put all these variances on that monstrous piece of property. But still leaves the flexibility for you all to come back in the future to come to us with anything in the world you think of, which I think will be great. Yeah, and I'm good with that. I mean, the intent. Right. So, I mean, I'm just taking Mossy Meadows a little more than half that distance, right? Right. Yeah, no.
Could we call that the floodplain?
Quentin, on
to
the, on the survey,
To
that's,
that's
you
too
want to come
far.
look at the survey, it spells out 536.13 feet down to where the fence makes a change in direction from this corner to down where the old stables were. So 550 would be probably dead on, pretty close.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
On the amendment.
On the
On the
amendment.
amendment, on the amendment.
I'd just like to suggest that the author restate it the way he said it the second time.
I'll be glad to. I would like to offer an amendment that would limit the variances approved tonight to a boundary from the eastern boundary of the property westward 550 feet onto the existing property only. Does that make it clear?
It does, but the east, it throws me off because the north pointing thing on this,
No, I'm sorry, the east, that's the eastern boundary. The Foxhall Lane side is the east, the stables are the west. It doesn't affect the southern boundary or the northern boundary at all.
so running east to west, 550 feet
That's correct.
south of the easement, the CPS easement along the McGimpsey Park.
We could almost shade
Well,
it.
We
yeah,
can work on
we
the
aren't
verbiage for
changing the
that because we
southern.
actually have, we've got the survey that shows, you know, that it's north 42 degrees, 01 minute, 13 seconds east. I mean, you've got this all here, and we can craft it, I think.
We know the spirit of what we're looking for.
We know the spirit. It's basically extending a point 550 feet from that corner.
Right.
Right, and we can nail that down if we just agree upon it. I think what I heard Brother Dooling saying, though, Bruce, is that you stated it differently the second time, where maybe you say something, you reference the proposed location for the new house and ABSUs is limited
Right.
to that area, which is roughly defined by this boundary.
Right. And just so you know, I firmly believe that this will grant the Bakers all of the relief that they've asked for, and it's also in the best interest of our city to memorialize the long-range intent.
Yep. No other discussion? We'll do a vote.
I'm sorry. And the second piece, which was about the,
I'm sorry, Bonnie, I left that in. And with a set prohibition in the variance, written into the variance, that prohibits third-party, it prohibits rental that is not, I don't even remember what I said the first time. What I'm trying to say is third-party rentals that is not for the benefit of the owner. How you word that? Jana, that's a mismatch of.
Public rental, if I may add.
Yeah, in other words.
Rentals to the public outside family members within the second degree of consanguinity, if you want.
I think what Jana was pointing out was that this is covered in the zoning ordinance in another location, and we don't have to say anything about it.
It is how, it is today.
So before the vote, let me recap it one more time for everyone. We have amended motion that's going to accept their variance, which is the legal description, CB 5778, Block 5, Lot 7, requesting the variance from the following: the dwelling for a second house, prohibiting one or more buildings, we're adding a building. We're going to have it in what is undefined front back, we assume is back, since the front it's an unusual lot. The fence is going to be granted a variance from around the front of the house in protection of the deer, but not obtrusive to anything from the front of the streets or seen by the normal public. A building that was added on the ASBU, the non-masonry steel building, which is not wooden, and under the spirit of masonry and the looks, besides the fireproofing, the steel building still follows some of that for our fire folks. Building permit, we didn't talk about, we would extend from 180 to 2 years. And then the amendment is we defined an area 550 feet east, so it encapsulates everything that has been spoke about here. I think that's it.
Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of Mr. Smiley Caliph's amendment, on that part that I have, for the same reasons he mentioned, since this runs with the land, I have no problem with what they proposed, but they're calling it a garage, which means then you have a garage within that area that does not have to be masonry forever and ever. That's why I really think it needs to be delineated as a barn.
We're asked that it be called an ASBU. It's an accessory building.
It is.
And that
It's
is
anything that's
That falls in the
non-habitable.
definitions of our codes.
Yes, and I think we're good there.
That's what I'm saying. We got sort of taken off on the words, but
No,
it is.
Well, personally, I don't think so, because garages are accessory buildings if they're not attached to the house. So what Bruce was saying earlier was, I think, exactly right. Since variances run with the land, I don't think we want all of that land to say you can have a garage that's made out of metal. So if it's an auxiliary building / parentheses, whatever.
Barn.
Farm, barn, or something like that, then that's what it's for,
That's
and it's
great.
not for a garage.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
It's a garage for a tractor.
No, it's not a garage.
It's a
It's a barn.
barn. It's a barn.
It's a barn, Jana.
It's a barn. I was
It's
tempted to
accessory
use
building
barn,
for the
but
tractor and the materials to maintain the property. Yes. All right, so I think we're clear there. Unless there's another amendment on this motion, we have a second. We're ready to vote. And we'll start on the right side with Walter. Aye? Bruce? Aye?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye, and it's unanimous aye, so we're passed. We now are entertaining a motion to close the meeting.
A motion we adjourn.
Motion,
Just 1 second, Tom. I think you need to vote on the amendment first and then vote on the amended motion,
You caught me there.
right?
The First Amendment?
Yeah,
So,
we need to
all
vote
the
on the
discussion and
amendment and then vote on the main motion.
Right.
Well, thank you.
Same, but we have to do it that way.
So now we can vote on the original amendment that was amended. And we can do this in favor of aye.
Do we
Aye.
need to do?
No,
Aye.
Aye.
Because, I just have a question. Does the city manager, whoever has to do this, have that motion?
This is what I have. If you guys want to hear some verbiage,
I'd like
I've
to
just
hear it
drafted.
before we vote.
And y'all tell me what you think. to limit these variances from the northernmost corner of the lot to a distance extending westward 550 feet along the property line defined as north 42 degrees 01 minutes 13 seconds east, and confined to the area of the proposed new house and ABSUs included in this request.
Thank you. Aye or nay?
Aye.
It is passed unanimous.
Motion, we adjourn.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Bonnie Hopkinson, thank you.